Hey everyone, this is your host, Elif from Antler Canada, and you are listening to Founder Files. Founder Files is a series of conversations with founders in the earliest days of their entrepreneurial journeys. You'll learn about their experiences of finding a co founder, validating ideas, and finding product market fit. Let's get started. I'm joined by Justin, a founder in residence from our third cohort in Toronto, and I'm very excited to be talking to Justin today and for you to get to know him because he was one of the most colorful personalities that I probably ever met. And he definitely brought a unique perspective and set of skills to the cohort. I'll stop my intro right here and give a big welcome to you, Justin. Thanks so much for joining me today and taking this time to chat with me. And I'll pass over the microphone so that we can get to know you better and you can do your proper intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Elif and Antler team. Yeah, my name is Justin. People call me Joyful Justin. So my last work experience was at an HR tech company and took the leap in June of 2020 to start Crowd Party, which is now my primary venture. And Crowd Party's purpose and vision is to make the future of work just a little bit more joyful or a lot more joyful. Customers have claimed that we're sort of like Netflix for workplace games. So we have clients, the likes of Shopify, Google, Atlassian. So people who are working remotely, hybrid, and now they're bringing Crowd Party back into the offices as people are returning to the offices. So my whole vision is to make the future of work a lot more joyful. Obviously, having worked at a tech company where culture was such an important and integral part of the organization, I felt like I was spoiled. And now it's my time to give back into the world by just essentially executing this vision so that other companies can also have a fun and joyful culture. And this year, I joined Antler as a founder in residence to essentially go on to the next moonshot. And the moonshot that we've ended up with was called Delightful, which brought me back to the future of workspace. Initially, I was going to work on a dating app, but for whatever reason, HR and the future of work found its way back to me. So Delightful will be out this summer. And think of Delightful as meetup.com for organizations. So really empowering employees to create their micro communities within an organization. Think book clubs, cycling clubs, maybe even movie clubs, right? So having a community for the interesting and diverse interests of employees. So we're going to be launching that this summer. So stay tuned.
Amazing. Amazing. Love that. Honestly, I think adults need more opportunities to make friends, make connections, find their tribe. And it just gets more and more difficult, I feel, or hear from friends as well. So I love that. And so does that mean that you'll be working on Crowd Party and Delightful at the same time, or is one of them not taking that much of your time?
So Crowd Party's been interesting because it was a bootstrap venture. Um, right now I have a team of five and sort of living the dream with the 4-hour work week with that
Mm,
venture. And what we're planning to do now is to build Delightful on their Crowd Party and essentially transition it into a more holistic company that tackles the future of work
mm,
gaps and
got it.
problems. Yeah.
Got it. I was just going to say there's actually overlap between like the mission. So a merge would, I guess, make sense for having them under one brand or one umbrella. Super.
Crowd Party
So,
brings back the joy and Delightful will make going back to workplace
yeah,
like more delightful. So you've got joyful and
amazing.
delightful.
Love the mission. So you mentioned that I think it was June 2020 that you left your job in HR tech. When did you actually know that you wanted to start a business? Did you leave your job and then among the pool of opportunities that you faced, did you then decide that the next step was to be a founder, or did you always know that you wanted to have something of your own? You had ideas that you wanted to execute on. How did you decide that that was the right moment to take the step?
Yeah, it's actually quite a funny story because I actually handed in my resignation for the company in November of 2019. So I
Mhm.
one day, this was around my birthday. I tend to get emotional around my birthday. It's not happy for me
Mm.
because I'm a Scorpio. I just overthink my birthday a lot. A week after my birthday, I walked into the office one morning and I spoke to my manager and I said, Emmanuel, I'm out of here by Q2 of 2020. And he was just like, what? And that's when I knew. So I always had a deadline for myself because it's always something that I've wanted to try out and do something on my own. So then, unbeknownst to me, March 2020, the pandemic came. And around that time, my manager and my peers at the time, they were like, "Hey, are you sure you still want to leave? Because it's looking bleak out there." And I tell my friends that I'm an irrational logician. And at the time, I guess like climbing the career ladder, like my sort of probability of death was like flatlined and the
Mm,
pandemic came, right? We didn't know what was happening. And all of a sudden, the probability of death was like it ticked just by an unknown amount, but there was still that probability. And I said to myself, if I were, knock on wood, right? If I were to die this year, like in 2020, would I be happy in the management track for this company? Or would I be happier taking the leap and trying to fulfill my dreams? So that was like my decision making process. Again, irrationally logical.
mhm.
And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna go through with it anyway. It was good because we didn't need office space, everything was remote, and people were still there were still lockdowns in place. So it was really like a nice and focused time for me to start building.
Yeah.
I said, hey, what the heck? Let's go with it. I mean, the worst case scenario for me was I just go back. And even that worst case scenario is not so bad
Yeah.
relative to their scenarios that are out there, I guess. It's like the worst case
Absolutely.
scenario is I just go back to work.
Yeah. And with the confidence and comfort then that you have taken that step for yourself and you have tried it out. And on the point of COVID kind of being a triggering moment for that decision, I feel like it actually was a trigger for a lot of other people as well. Like some of them took the leap into entrepreneurship, some of them took the leap into becoming creators. Like that's a space that I followed pretty closely. So I haven't seen so many successful creators pop up other than that phase when COVID started because everyone had so much extra time or time to reevaluate their life priorities and things they always wanted to do. An interesting timing.
It was definitely like an interpersonal reset for a lot of
Yeah.
folks, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And so let's now fast forward to this year, you joining Antler in mid February for the third program. So, how would you kind of evaluate your options? What other options were on the table for you to make it happen for Delightful? Or did you actually maybe also combining that question with the question of did you come into the program knowing that you wanted to work on Delightful, or were you open to other ideas as well?
yeah, it was pretty interesting. At the time I was doing some contracting consulting work for another startup called Zoo Life. I'm gonna shout them out because they're an amazing
Mhm.
company. They recently partnered with the Toronto Zoo. So they were everywhere when I visited last weekend. And at that time, they wanted to hire me full time as like a senior engineer.
Mhm.
And Crowd Party now was bootstrapped, and my co-founder and I, we decided that we'd essentially turn it into a lifestyle business. So now I have a lifestyle business I'm running a few hours per week, and now I get this senior engineer salary, and I can travel the world. Right. So that was the game plan was okay, if I accept this position, I can travel freely wherever I want to. And then Antler sort of was on my radar for a long time, very much so active on Twitter. And one of my good Twitter friends, Boris, who is the founder of Baseline, actually went through the Antler program, I'd say back in 2021. And we talked about it. And then lo and behold, Antler applications started rising up on my LinkedIn feed. And as they were rising up, Naaman reached out, and I'm a big believer in signs. Again, that irrational part of me. But Antler was always popping up, right? So I had to make that difficult decision of, okay, should like in my point of view, like the former approach of just traveling the world was easy, like the easier path. Yeah, I'll
Mhm.
get a nice, comfortable salary. I get to travel. But I like taking the difficult route. And that's when I really considered Antler because this was the right time for me to start my next venture. Now that I have a lifestyle business, I can really go for the moonshot, raise for funding, and it just all worked out. And I talk about death a lot because the initial idea I pitched to Antler was death tech. So it was technology in the death space. I hold sort of the three tenets that I have in my life, and I learned this about 3 years ago, is to really solve joy, love, and death. So joy was something I solved with the crowd party. Love was this whole dating app that I went into Antler, so fixated on trying to solve dating apps because they're so predatory, the current offerings. And I thought I had a really great solution. But then, like I said, the future of work made its way back to me. And now I'm sort of solving love through the workplace. And really, love distills down to human connection. I
Mhm.
said, hey, as I was doing research for the dating app, it was more than a dating app problem. It was really a human connection problem. There was this interesting stat that said 70% of adults in North America are lonely. And I said, we made friends at school. Why can't we make friends at work? And how do we empower employees to start making those long lasting relationships at the workplace so that there's a better sense of belonging, there's a better sense of togetherness, better sense of community. And now that everybody's trying to go back into the workplace, I think it's the right time. Long story short, it went from death to love to now workplace love.
I love that you have such a clear vision on what you want to solve for. I like, I don't think everyone really starts off with that, but I love how you just described it as wanted to solve for love, joy, or death. And you're tapping into all of those areas at different points in your life and with different ventures, it seems.
At the end of the day, like even when I was in like the Antler program or before that, I was part of the DMZ. I think there are two types of entrepreneurs, right? So there are like the business savvy entrepreneurs who are like, okay, these are the problems in the market, right? This is a huge opportunity, right? And then on kind of the other side of the spectrum, you have the artists who are like, hey, this is what I'm passionate for. I'm building this because I want to use it for myself. I think that is what type of entrepreneur I am. I'm more of like the sort of the striving artist where it's like, hey,
Hmm.
I don't like the way the world works at the moment and I'm really passionate for this. So I'm going to try and solve it. So yeah, I think as I go through all these like programs and even in my network, there are definitely two types of entrepreneurs. And,
Yeah.
for me, if I'm going to be working on a company for 5 to 7 years, I got to be waking up and really passionate for this problem. And to me, the problems that I'm obviously passionate about are human centric. Like, how can we essentially employ technology? I think the next wave of technology is not going to be technology for technology's sake. I think it's going to be technology for that sort of brings us back to humanity. Because now with all the AI and stuff, content is becoming more automated, right? So now that we've built technologies to get rid of the mundane, I think the next wave of technologies are more human centric. It's technologies to make us less dependent on technology, if that makes sense.
It does. I am all for that type of technology personally. I think that you shared a lot of great insights and things to think about for aspiring future entrepreneurs as well, in terms of like how you define the two types of entrepreneurs. I think that's something important to give some thought to and do some personal reflection on before probably stepping into taking such a big step in your life. Thanks for sharing those. I personally find that they're pretty helpful. And so when you were coming into it, or then after making the decision, what were your expectations? What did you want to get out of the program? And did you end up finding them?
Yeah. So I've always had this like wacky dream of like basically like locking in the world's most creative mind into one room and see what comes out of it. I don't know if it's a wacky or twisted dream, but it's like put everybody in a pressure cooker, put the world's most brilliant minds in a pressure cooker and lock them in a room and then just see what happens as an experiment. And that was sort of my expectation going into LA. I'm like, wow, I'm with like 54 other founders who are like on the top of their games, right? Whether it comes from education or prior experience. So it was really cool to see my dream come alive in an indirect way because I was planning to do it myself, like just lock
Mhm.
creative geniuses in a room. But Antler did it for me and I got to experience how that worked out. And it was beautiful, right? So that's the only expectation I had. Obviously, I wanted to learn a little bit more about the business fundamentals, almost like an MBA boot camp for me, because as an engineer, it's something that I really need to brush up on. So learned a lot through the program. I think even the fireside chats with founders has really been invaluable to me.
Yeah. And so maybe on that point, I can ask you, like, what were some of the highlights for you during the program then? And this can be in the sense of meeting someone. It can be a certain week, a timeline in the 7 weeks that you were part of the program. Or it can also be some of the sessions, like some of the speakers that like, yeah, you just mentioned.
Yeah, one of the highlights I keep thinking about was I was paired up with two other founders, Aldo and Suba, and we had to do this business model canvas thing, right? Like this exercise. And I really wanted to solve love at the time. So there was this whole idea around dating app, and you have somebody like Aldo who is now working in prop tech and Suba working on prop tech as well. Their backgrounds are so vastly different from like my background in terms of what I wanted to solve. Just seeing them so just passionate about solving the problem and really seeing how you can solve the problem of love from a different angle. Because they were coming in from like a business angle, right? Aldo worked at Meta previously, so he had this social angle on it. So really like distilling down this kind of like abstract problem and systemizing it and just seeing them flourish with ideas during that session, I was like, wow, like these folks were not interested in solving the problem of love because I'm sure they are to some degree, but in that context, right? They didn't want to create a dating app, but they had the amazing knowledge and skill sets to make it more systematic, engineer the solution towards the vision. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you would have never thought that they'd be so passionate about trying to solve this problem of love. And once we got on the board, it's like idea here, idea there. It's, oh, these are customers. Oh, ideas for customers, ideas for how to like market it. And it was just amazing. And I think that was I think the testament to how some of these workshops are really good in terms of just converging different perspectives.
True. I find that those working sessions are not typically things that we, like an entrepreneur, would get engaged in unless they are actually in this type of an environment where that is fostered, that is encouraged, and that's part of the output that we want to see. So you don't just set a meetup with your friends and just get in front of a whiteboard and all of a sudden start solving for something that you're all passionate about. That's not just a typical exercise that we do. So I think getting that opportunity to meet up with these people and I guess that merging of very, very exceptional minds into a room. And as you said, like engineering that problem with different approaches, different angles.
Yeah, it was like a beautiful I still remember it to this day. I'm just like, who would have thought? Who would have thought that?
Super cool. And so, what were maybe some of the learnings and takeaways that you left the program off with?
A few learnings was that as an entrepreneur, I think you have to come in a program like this with an open mind. And I think Adler did a good job with that in terms of diversifying the different backgrounds. Because, like I said, going back to the highlight, it's like I would have never thought that these people would have been kind of interested even in trying to come up
Mhm.
with solutions. But I think the space, like you mentioned, was open to that. It was just
Yeah.
open to multidisciplinary backgrounds, right? So that's one learning. It's like, oh, wow, like I need to be more open minded about who I work
Mm.
with as well, because it's like some of these folks, biggest advantage is that they are seeing it from a different perspective, right?
Mhm.
The other big learning is that finding the right co-founder. And I think Antler did a really good job with this because from the get-go, that was the expectation that was set. And they really had amazing wisdom around finding the right co-founder and just trying to find somebody who aligns not only skill set wise. I think that was one of the things because I came
Mhm.
into this program. I had this expectation. I need a business guy, right? I'm a technical guy. And I think seeing how the tracking out process with the other co-founders and how fluid that was really key because that allowed us to learn a lot about our founders. For example, like I was with a co-founder and I thought we were like such an excellent match because we were aligned on everything, mind, body, and soul. Like he's
Mm.
still my soul brother to this day. We just met up 3 days ago, but there was a misalignment in terms of in terms of really wanting to solve the problem. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that Antler really pushed for is this fluidity of trying to work with the right person. And even if it fails, like at the end of the day, you get a good friend out of it.
Yeah. I like that perspective. So, final couple of questions, I guess, is what's next for you? We briefly talked about it in the beginning, like you gave some signals about it, but I'd love to still ask that question, like what's the next steps for you? What's awaiting you in your journey? And then also your final words of wisdom for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Okay. In terms of next steps, obviously I did make it past IC, but I think at the end of the day, you get what you make out of the program. In my case, I came out with a new startup beyond the confines of Antler. I'm still going to fulfill and execute that startup. And so we're going to be focusing on essentially developing a strategy, piloting it with two companies this summer, and trying to see if we can bootstrap it up until we need to raise. And I think that sort of segues beautifully into the words of wisdom. Oftentimes, when founders usually get into this program, there's a goal in mind, right? And in this case, Antler was great, but there's also this like goal of have to raise 150,000 from like the
Mhm.
IC, which is great, right? It's a great goal to have. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you are ready to raise that. And that is something that you want. So I just don't want founders to lose their vision and their conviction because they have to play to a certain goal. At the end of the day, if you're a founder, this is your business, right? This is your brainchild. So you're going to have to do everything in your capacity to ensure that you execute on that. So don't give up,
Yeah.
even even when it seems like the universe is against you. And sometimes it is. In my case, I didn't make it past IC, right? But that shouldn't stop people from really executing their gift to the world. That's what a
Mhm.
startup is. It's the founder's gift to the world.
100%. Love it. Thank you. Oh my God. I love this conversation. It was an absolute pleasure getting to know you, Justin, like throughout the program and also just having this conversation with you as well. Thank you so much for taking your time. Lovely to have you over here on this episode.
Thank you so much, Alif, for having me. And thank you to the rest of the Antler team.
Well, have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye,
Have a great
Justin.
weekend,
Bye.
Alif.
Thank you.
Bye.